Good morning, everybody. We are Group 1, and we'll be presenting on 1717 West Webster Avenue in Chicago, same site as the last group. And the title of this project is Junction. And designers are Neal Brown. I'm a student here.
Brandon Temple. I'm also a student here at Grad too.
And William Broms. I go by Bill, and I'm also a master's.
Never use the Mac.
All right, so just kind of a overview of the breakdown here. We'll be going by project program summary, quick review and context studies, master plan development, individual building breakups, system analysis, and then we'll conclusion for you guys. Hopefully not take too long today. So a brief project and program summary, just kind of an overview of the approach that this project has taken. It's in response to the public housing conditions that have historically plagued Chicago. Function Junction establishes a mixed-use development with 50% low-income units while providing residents and community members with the educational and financial services, rentable units, amenities, and communal engagement that give transitional residents the tools and outlets necessary to develop financial autonomy. So what this means, eventually, what we'll get into here is a slow displacement of concentrated housing projects through Chicago that had a very high risk of just neglect and abuse, and trying to create a more sustainable model. So diving into our lit review and context studies, just to give a little more background to a lot of the design forces, major design forces that kind of drove this project. So the three main books we did.
So my book was Race for Profit, how banks and the real estate industry undermined Black home ownership. So this book kind of gave us a general background on kind of what was going on in the time period of the kind of late 50s, early 60s, and kind of how it talks about how the banks kind of undermined the government programs that were kind of set in place to help underprivileged groups obtain homes, and how the banks profited from this. So that book just gave us the kind of overall background on what was going on.
And then getting into Toxic Communities by Dorchetta Taylor, she talks about conditions that create, define, and develop a community. And she does a great job comparing those to the conditions surrounding most public housing projects. Especially, she focused on quite a few in Chicago, and she does a great job identifying a pattern of abuse and neglect that those concentrated housing projects have discussed, as I mentioned before. And as Temple was saying, she also goes into define those more social and kind of economic conditions, legal conditions that all kind of surround these public housing projects that were just so abusive.
And then for my literature review, Golden Gates Fighting for Housing in America. While it wasn't focused on Chicago, there was still a lot of connections made where it's not simply isolated to Chicago or to San Francisco. So the book kind of focuses on, kind of talks about the issues of how a lot of bigger cities focus more on the commercial aspects and kind of retail and getting jobs, but they don't focus on how to get those people to work at the jobs. There's a kind of an imbalance of housing and commercial features where there's not enough people living in the city to actually have all of these jobs. So there's a bunch of commercial centers that end up failing, and you have, housing prices skyrocket. So one of the things that we wanted to do was kind of have a lot of housing units so that we kind of start to balance the retail and commercial versus the housing in Chicago.
And again, these were just the 3 books that we really dove into. We had the rest of the class do their presentation on all their literature pieces, which definitely helped us kind of narrow down how we wanted to go about this project. For our main precedent study, we thought it would be pretty appropriate because we had seen so many references to the Chicago Housing Authority and the Chicago Housing Projects. We thought it would be pretty appropriate to make it a very regionally concentrated precedent. So we decided to dive into the CHA as a whole, the Chicago Housing Authority, and kind of pick apart their progression and their evolution as they went along. So starting off, they were very kind of timid, low-rise, and again, just concentrated housing units, maybe up to like 300, 200 to 400 units at a time. Like Trumbull Park was a entirely white housing project, and this is kind of how they started as well. They were racially segregated, and it wasn't in any kind of, not any real legal sense. It was more de facto of what was going on behind the scenes and what people were just used to and what they wanted to remain the same. So there was marginal success in these housing developments like Trumbull Park until you had that conflict of race where they actually allowed black women to move in because her skin was so light. And then you had all of these race riots going on for the next 3 weeks at a time, thousands of people showing up outside their house, bombarding them, screaming just absolute obscenities. And so you had that theme of de facto segregation carry on as the CHA continued. As you see in like Robert Taylor, Cabrini Green, we'll look at Ida B. Wells is another one, Robert L. Hicks. There was just no shortage of chicken coop style, just like how many bodies can we fit into the smallest square footage possible, and you'll see how fast they fail. So looking at Cabrini Green as a case study, as I was saying, this one started about 1950, and that just giant uprise in the population coming from northern migration and returning veterans from World War II. And I don't know if anybody's seen Candyman. That is where the base, the kind of setting of that movie is at. So the conditions were that horrific that they actually made a horror movie out of it. And they did, the new one is, it does a great job kind of looking at the racial issues and political issues that are all kind of rolled up into it. And Cabrini was another one that kind of had the same pattern. It started with low rise, just kind of, can't think of the name of the housing style, just like cookie cutter housing, low rises, and they were more successful than they turned into. Like Harold L. Lakes was another concentrated high rise one. They had about, I believe it was 7 high rises that held at one point 20,000 people, and it was, the number of units averaged at about 5 people per unit. So, and the conditions were just more. And so, what we are seeing with the restitution as the CHA has gone along, they are integrating and implementing much more comprehensive developments into their planning now. It's a lot more mixed use. It's a lot more community engaging. It has all sorts of amenities that drive economic presence and just social engagement where people can get together and really enjoy and spend time. So some of the details for master plan, and some of it's in effect right now. I believe it's anticipated to be done about 2025. So yeah, I think it'll be very cool to see how that plays out. What are specific case studies? Villa Verde.
Yeah, so this building is located in Boston, which has a kind of similar housing crisis as Chicago as does the rest of the country. But the Villa Verde is kind of a model development that can be used around the country that defines kind of sustainable goals of living and just kind of overall inclusion of everyone. Yeah, simple on it.
Yeah, so just kind of hitting the main point of those contexts, precedent case studies, is we saw that model of high, concentrated, low income housing was just not working. Was very just high risk to abuse, and so the main things we noticed from the new case studies was just that higher comprehension and planning and integration of a lot more elements that allow these people, these low-income individuals to the tools and the outlets to actually succeed and to develop some financial autonomy. So just going over the basic kind of site context, we'll go through this one because last group that's presented on it. It's about 5.5 miles northwest of downtown Chicago, main loop. It is right on the border of Bucktown and Wicker Park in Chicago. It is a very well-established area. As Abby's group was saying, it has a very rich cultural history, but it has seen some gentrification, so a lot of that has been pushed out. And there is kind of this blanket hipster vibe to the entire town. So we are, have some natural forces, great air quality, especially for me in Chicago, this highly dense development. And you can actually see just the streetscaping and the greenscaping that goes on throughout the entire community is very well done. And what is there saying on our site as well? Not so much. So that's definitely a theme we want to continue. Again, along on the North Branch of the Chicago River, thinking about drainage, stormwater runoff, how are we going to kind of handle and do what we can to help the water level and water quality restriction on the river. Topography pretty flat, very, very layered, as most of Chicago is, just continuing to build up. So not crazy drainage water problems. So yeah, here we go. It's existing development, so you can see they have done a very good job establishing their infrastructure and their districts throughout the entire plan. It's been a great master plan that's worked very well for them. And we kind of lie at the intersection of those two main corridors, and they are pretty centralized retail clusters, so it's something we'll see quite a bit of traffic from all mediums on the site. Foot traffic, the train yard is not, half a mile, not even quarter mile down south of the corner. And so foot traffic, bicycle traffic, vehicular traffic, train traffic, and not pretty boat traffic, but some industrial stuff going on the river. So this is just to provide a little bit more context for Bucktown, just kind of get the feel of it. It's very pretty community, very well established. Occupational employment demographics. This is where we see a bit of a discrepancy with the practicality of a plan of placing low-income individuals in this region. They're not going to have a crazy variety of but not going to have a crazy variety of jobs to apply for housing. So establishing and developing a commercial side for development, something that was rentable units that they could occupy and work from themselves, propagate themselves, was something that we felt was absolutely necessary to have those tools and outlets. Systems and mobility, again, just looking at the major traffic thoroughfare through all of this. Here's our site right here. See primary street stations right down here. Again, just just very good connectivity, great walkability scores, great bicycle paths. Bottom right here is how far you can get with all the public transit within a half an hour. And it's a lot of bus stops, free access to fire, and police as well. So in water systems, basic, again, just touching on the Chicago River and the actual reservoir tunnel plan for Chicago. Sometimes it does get backed up, so doing what we can, trying to design the building with so much capacity that it itself can act as some type of reservoir, would, just, in the process, recycle rainwater, stormwater. And then food systems, just it is very well greenscape throughout the entire city, but there's not much viable way of agricultural plantings. There's not much farming going on, obviously. So again, thinking about green roofs and planters where we could on site, providing those low-income individuals with access to fresh food, and maybe even using that as resources for the business they're going to propagate. One more sensory bit. I get to feel very low. So just kind of context summary here, kind of an overview. We're looking at natural, built, cultural, and historic context surrounding all of 1717 West Webster, our site. It has great potential to foster transitional success for low-income occupants through comprehensive development that integrates a wide range of program functions and potentials for residents to be happy, healthy, and successful. Junction seeks to set the precedent. Right.
Good stuff. Masterplan development.
The context now. So to speak.
So this is just kind of showing just kind of the basic breakdown of each of our services. So we are going primarily residential. You can see that's kind of a majority of our total square footage, along with kind of the other, making sure that there's parking. We base our parking percentage kind of based on the total occupancy of the building, and then based on the building codes. That kind of dictated that we could do. We didn't necessarily have to provide parking for every single unit, but we can provide parking for most, as you'll see later, kind of the amenities that we provide, along with the connectivity we talked about, our closeness to the train station, our connectivity to just kind of the closeness of Bucktown's retail corridors and all that other stuff allowed us to not need a lot of parking and kind of other spots for that. So we kind of made that a smaller percentage while still including a lot of services and commercial and retail areas. Again, as Neal was saying, for the residents to work in and provide jobs for them. And then this just kind of shows the basic kind of circulation patterns we decided over the site. So you can kind of see we created a kind of main corridor for both vehicle, or including vehicle, bike, and walking. And so that was to kind of provide, due to the track, the train tracks that run this way, if you didn't include this, we would kind of have this whole long stretch that you would have to go around the site. So kind of including this kind of increase that connectivity. And then we also have an under-track tunnel that goes underneath the commuter line to go to the grocery store that's located right over here. So just kind of increasing that connectivity. And then that just kind of in the background, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is showing the bubble diagram kind of how our site ended up being laid out.
So further site development. So as Bill mentioned, our main kind of mobility corridor. So this is also going to double as kind of the sound barrier with all native plantings, as well as a kind of soundproof sound system on that side. But along that same corridor, we see we tried to incorporate more community cultural values. So as we'll mention, actually, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. Yes, I am. But the main kind of points of our site are going to be these big entrance plazas, as well as how we distributed the program along the site. So the green spaces are going to be our main public spaces, which are going to be the commercial spaces of our site. And these all surround a central corridor, courtyard, with parking.
These are preliminary, so
Yeah.
So going into form development again, just kind of reiterating what this distribution of the site was. We do have this wonky triangular site that doesn't have any really good angles. That's not even a 90 up in the corner. That's like 100 or like a 98-degree angle. It's big. But starting off, being in such a high volume traffic spot, that triangulation between this Webster, Elston, and Ashland, bisected by the north branch of the Amtrak rail line, you just see a lot of traffic going over this spot, and also being at the bridge point to get over the Chicago River for Webster and Ashland on the other side. You see a lot of vehicular traffic. So just emphasizing that accessibility to the site, providing those storefront units, those rentable commercial units at grade and at that first level above the parking and the exposed courtyard, all public spaces, all highly accessible. Traffic corridor on the other end, paired with the green corridor for biking, pedestrian, and vehicular traffic through the site. The displacement of parking underneath the site, and with 3 major egress points, all two-way, for just great access. North side street parking as well supplements that. And we were able to get away with about 60% capacity because of the walkability, accessibility, and just access to public transit in the area. So getting into environmental forces, we ran over a lot of iterations for form finding, doing all sorts of stuff. We ultimately decided that a perimeter footprint was what we wanted to do for the site. We thought it worked well, and we could kind of manipulate it how we needed to. So starting off, we had very particular cuts that were centralized to the center of the site. And as we kept going and distributing spaces and kind of fitting things into place, we also optimized it through a couple of environmental softwares and changed some of our cut and stub backs and some of the programmatic distribution, so that some reform got changed.
So with those software optimizations, so the major changes, we kind of had a goal going into this was to increase our overall solar exposure and solar radiation percentage by roughly 20%, and then making these micro adjustments of just kind of changing the angles of the cuts. Saw that a 20% rise for the use of PV panels, but we're not going to put PV panels all around the building. Everything is going to be a PV panel, so those are little
So yeah, just kind of looking at overall distribution of space. This first section 1 is a long cut looking kind of northeast on the site. So you're seeing it pick up Temple's building on the left side and the services on the right there. The courtyard parking all underneath this place like that. Again, it's a preliminary. You'll see change a little bit. And similar with the section 2, you're seeing a couple of bills and Temple's building as well. And then looking at building breakup, at building A, this is this guy that includes the services on the southern end. Temple at building B, which is the northern edge of it, and building C, which is the southwestern edge of it, major street facing side. So just kind of going through the flow of the building, looking at the first floor, let's take you through and then we'll go into individual buildings. You can see it a little better. We've got two major access points here. This is more public. This is a little more private. The public access point has a public laundry and bike storage that is open for anybody to use while they're accessing the units or, shopping, running around the area. The privatized has the trash and service pickup, some system spaces, and another more private buffered too, so it's not going to be sticky, but another more buffered private entrance that accesses all the private floor and residential floors, and they're going to be key carded, so not supposed to. Service on the southern edge here. That is, you're looking at is the Elderly Outreach Center with some office spaces and the central lobby on the commercial street-facing side along with Bill's stuff, and then two commercial units so to the left of that. Bill's, you are seeing the double height mezzanine corridor that connects all of that commercial district and those rentable spaces. That connects also to the courtyard overhead. And then on Temple side, you are seeing.
Yeah. So in my building, especially on the first floor and the second floor, it's going to be more commercial oriented, but it's for small mom and pop shops. On the corner, actually, I'm going to get into this more when you talk about individual buildings. Okay, second floor. As I stated, it's going to be all kind of rentable spaces for the residents, geared towards the residents and their financial success.
Same courtyard layout, and then these are ADA accessible ramps and staircase that connect at grade to the courtyard, so it's just very accessible for everybody. Courtyard layout you're seeing that connects all those rentable units, commercial spaces, people can shop, hang out, and services again, occupy at southeastern tip. And that's going to be financial services, which is accessible to the public and, residents, adults, and things like that. And that is the after school programs, which are a little more cut off, and just a little more around.
Yeah, so the third floor and up is primarily going to be kind of residential amenities besides the services.
Yes, the services on the third floor, which is having limited access, is going to be the child care center and then some room for the outreach. And then, we're looking at, for residential layouts, we're looking at studio all the way up to 3 bedrooms, and as an equitable development, those are going to be available to both when we come in market rate units. And there's really not any discrepancy. We had a few units that were particularly nice layouts, which we reserved as market rate for a higher rate, just to ensure there was some economic stability for the building coming in anyway.
As we get into the mobility corridor, I can actually explain. So the kind of big idea with the mobility corridor was, again, to provide that sound buffer from that train, but it was also to incorporate community art that is actually going to be kind of designed and implemented by the services area and the child care program, the after school program, getting the youth involved in the community early, and letting them have an impact the overall character of the year.
Mention Marriott.
Yes.
Yeah, track's actually sit about 18 feet above. It varies over the site, but at that point, they sit about 18 feet above right at the site. So looking at just development in the courtyard, lots of planters, planting pathways, just public areas, rest areas, pause areas for people to sit, enjoy. engaged with all of these, it's very centralized between all of these services and these rental store and commercial units, where they're just constantly kind of talking it as maybe they'll buy that, maybe buy this, just talking to people, just helps build community, and makes this site very accessible, very, it's just a place that people might want to be. Development. What too fast? And then just touching on master plan development, looking at the sector perspective, kind of the AIA top 10 here. Design for energy will have approximately 10,000 square feet of PV panels, rooftop and solar windows. Sustainable efficient stepping within the building from form that capitalizes on solar and wind exposure. Design for economy, rentable storefront, rental, and commercial spaces linked with double height. All the things we kind of touched on. Getting into building A, and we'll kind of it's just a general schematic breakup, and this is a preliminary design as well. So you're just seeing kind of the ideas going in behind this. And at this phase, I was considering what was going to be publicly accessible, privately accessible, semi-public, residentially public. So a lot of definitions kind of thinking about, and definitely wanted to make that southern tip a very approachable and kind of engaging point, and putting services at the forefront I thought was appropriate, because that really does help to establish these the financial autonomy for these low-income residents. And so just saying like this is what we're here to do. We're here to engage you. We're here to help you. And then residential just kind of got pushed back. That displacement of the program space pushed up and back, and just making sure it's very accessible, cutting out what we could from the planning grade. And this, the whole building ended up with 62 units. There were 3 4-bedrooms. There's 62 units. Sorry. And then just a floor plan for building A. Again, seeing here's going to be main entrance for service spaces. You've got another entrance around the backside that's linked to the parking garage. That's a little more privatized. Office spaces in the back there. Elderly outreach on kind of lounge center and community engagement center. So this kind of puts them in the center of a spot to be, as people just don't have much like real community engagement. So other than church and bingo. So this kind of puts them in the center of a spot to be, and it steps back above that, the courtyard too, with a lot of glass windows, so they get excellent morning light, and just nice kitchen area and space to exercise, and good access to the gym level above that as well. More on the services on the second level. This is a public lounge as well. Connects to outside, not directly to the services, but also to the gym above. And then we're seeing some commercial units on the other side. And then typical floor plan for residential units, and then the child care services and sun. And this is, typical residential floor plan. So these will just continue to step back as the building it goes up in levels. And major section. So you're just seeing all the actual connectivity here. All service spaces, some of which are public, like the sunroom, and then public vertical access here. public access into the building on that first one, private access back there. And then as you go up in floors, you're seeing the courtyard engagement level, which is pretty much entirely public. And then above that is all residential. And fifth floor, you're seeing the actual room, which has just direct connection to that public lounge. So there's not much overlap between the two. And it's this section. There was a three-story staircase that connects it to the public side of these services with a lot of open space. Renders side where those public lounges are residentially public lounges, so just great access to sunlight all throughout the year. And then a look at the front view, so you're seeing the staircase ramp. That topography ramp slopes entirely up to the way to the courtyard. There's that as well. Major public service access, public access, and stuff back at the top. So you're also seeing that coverage over the ADA ramp. Let's see. Piece of access. And that is building A for a residential corner.
Now we'll get into building B. So my building is primarily a residential-oriented building. Through a schematic design, I had originally planned for 7 floors, with 2 floors being primarily rentable space and kind of leasing offices. And then every floor above that being residential and residential catered amenities. But through later design, I did add another floor, which I will show later. But on the first floor, kind of the big idea was to provide spaces for residents to rent and run a small business if they choose. Spaces where they can sell, grow their business, and kind of attract people in and buy the product and kind of develop that financial autonomy. But on the corner, there is a space for a coffee shop and or kind of restaurant, and then another space for a restaurant, dark gray. And then at the center of the building, kind of the dividing point between residential geared amenities and rentable retail space is a big open atrium with spaces to socialize and communicate with each other. And then the main residential entrance is on our west side, which is also connected into the parking garage. And then on the second floor, you can see it is kind of primarily all leasing space and office type space for those businesses that don't really have products to sell, but more or less just need spaces to work. And then the main kind of leasing offices for the residential units and those actual rental spaces. On the 5th floor, which is actually my largest floor, but this is a typical floor plan for 3 through 5. 3 is kind of cut short down here, just kind of bumps out as you see in one of the later renders. But the 5th floor, being the largest, is going to contain the largest rooms. So there are 3 3-bedroom units within this actual floor, and then there is 7 others scattered throughout the other floors. And the main idea kind of with the residential units was to provide that high quality living for underprivileged people who have not got to experience that. And then, so the 3rd floor through the 5th floor are double loaded corridors. And then above that, so 6th through 8th, you get into your AC loading corridor. That also provides kind of big gathering spaces, spaces for the residents to, again, interact, socialize, and come out and enjoy this big public open balcony, look out into the sites, and just be a great place to be. So in the building section, you can see the atrium space that provides kind of main residential and retail spaces, as well as kind of just the overall layout to the floors. So this kind of main render, you can see a big vertical circulation staircase here. That is because the building is so long on that north side. I did have to buy 3 staircases, but I think it kind of creates a big focal point, and it would really just draw people in. Here's a shot of the southern facade. As you can see, we have large kind of overhangs that will help mitigate some of the solar in the summer and allow for that penetration of that sunlight in the winter months.
All right, so building C. So this is kind of the main commercial. So you can kind of see from this rendering, you can see these first 2 floors, double height storefront that just kind of allows plenty of light to come into this commercial space. And over here we have kind of the food court area that I'll cover later, so we'll dive in. So this is kind of the initial massing that we got of it, kind of showing the general layout of the residential units, as well as you can kind of see where those restaurant spaces, food court, along with the commercial space and kind of that open atrium area, and you can kind of see the stairs and this massing as those kind of bluish blocks. And then you can kind of see how each of the floors, as it goes up, kind of steps in and kind of provides those good rooftop courtyard spaces that you'll see in some of the renders. So kind of starting on the first floor, you have kind of this main food court over here. You have a residential kind of lobby over here that's got the elevators and the stairs, as well as the main kind of atrium retail corridor, as well as access from the parking garage. Looking at the second floor, you've got the stairs that go up to the rest of the retail spot. It kind of has a rest area with some storefront windows that can kind of view out into that courtyard area. And then you've got more food court spaces for people to either open up their own restaurant or could be filled with other businesses could possibly fit. And then looking at this is the third floor, so kind of showing this is my biggest residential floor, and so kind of from here steps back to give you each of the spaces over each of the ascending floors, and then over on that side is where it connects with Temple's building that you saw in that render. Then looking at these sections, you can kind of see kind of the general atrium space down here, along with all of these leasing spaces on the first and second floor, and then that stepping along with the major vertical axes, as well as the elevators for all residential floors. And then this is just kind of a general view of how the solar energy is on each of these rooftops. So it just kind of shows what they'll be talking about in a little bit as the solar panels, as we kind of mentioned before. This just kind of shows a general of how the rooftop space receives that sunlight. and then this was looking at the general efficiency of the building, looking at kind of these were the four main factors kind of influencing the cost of the building. So you can kind of see the main kind of jump is the HVAC unit. So kind of what they had talked about earlier is focusing on kind of these passive designs and making sure solar gain is maximized in the winter and minimized in the summer. And so that's apparent looking at a traditional HVAC unit over here, and then kind of going to the more efficient systems. You can kind of see that cost drop there. The other thing is lighting efficiency and plug load efficiency, which is just kind of the usage of the lights in the residential spaces, as well as appliances that are plugged in, toasters, refrigerators, anything that's not HVAC or lighting. And then kind of the I'd say second to the HVAC would be the operating schedule. Since we are residential, it's all kind of 24/7, which is the least cost effective, but since it is a residential unit, it's kind of unavoidable. So using these other cost-effective passive designs helps us to kind of mitigate that extra cost of running 24/7. And so it's just kind of the main view from the courtyard of kind of seeing the storefront spaces and then residential views from the balconies, along with the main bridge that connects the residential units to the gym space in Neal's building.
So, getting into building systems. So, as we were talking about in the beginning, water is a big one that we were looking at. How can we help control clean picture quality for Chicago River? So on site, we do have, it's kind of a multi-buffered zone. So it goes from the building to all the way into the site, the actual topography of the site. We have a lot of designated roof systems and spaces, dog parks, just regular parks, gardens, solar fields, planters, patios and ledges, all connected and drained to a water recycling system within the structure. And that infiltrates gray water into the roof and the site by just natural gravitational sloping. Will naturally percolating water both on and off site. So just because of all those different components that factor in, building doesn't have capacity, and wasn't able to give actual number of gallons on this, but it does have a capacity of something like an actual retention pond, just because it has all of those reservoirs and just extra storage systems within, built into the planters, built into the roofs, built into the system itself. Yep, it's good. And then an actual. So looking at the actual numbers here, just kind of an average, 432 residents, another 320 occupants. We're looking at about 750 maximum capacity for the building. So the water usage could measure up to about 50,000 gallons a day. Obviously, we're not going to mitigate all of that, but providing about four tanks that operate at about 12,000 per day, even if it's not actually doing all that work, could be less of a capacity for the unit itself, would just help greatly in just our water footprint, hydraulic footprint, I guess. And then looking at electrical, again, as we were talking about, we have a little over 10,000 square feet of solar panel exposure, and pretty good either direct south or directly upward exposure. So panels, overhangs, shading devices, optimized program functionality, those are all worked in with the high performance facades, exterior louver systems. And and the array of solar panels that actually plant into the and again, kind of looking at what we're actually going to mitigate with that solar, with all the solar panels. It would be nice to be able to use a storage bank, which they do have the technology for now. Probably not going to be totally feasible because most of what energy will be obtained by the solar panels will be used up pretty quickly. So at about 12,000 kilowatt hours per day, community occupants, is what the building could cost up to. So we can do about 250 watts per square foot, 1 hour per square foot at so almost about 3,500 kilowatt hours. In perfect conditions, that is what the solar panels would provide. And then the typical HVAC plan, and this is at the parking garage level. So you're seeing in the blue is the main actual branches for the HVAC unit system, and then the red are jet exhaust channels, and those will help with all of the bad quality air that gets collected under the courtyard and the parking garage, along with some vent systems that kind of and then this is just some detailing for the SoA system, what we hope to use for the exterior louver system, sliding and rotational, hopefully pretty easily constructed.
Looking into the structure, we did hybrid structure. I know a couple of other students in the other group did that. So we used on the first 2 floors, we have a either concrete column or steel column construction on the bottom. And then on the 3rd floor, there is actually a platform. And in this kind of hybrid construction, you want the platform to be thick enough to allow for hanging columns, as you're going to need a different structure pattern for the wood columns compared to concrete columns. The wood columns need to be closer together due to their decreased capabilities. So kind of looking at this and just kind of running through these real quick. The total amount of columns is just kind of a basic count there. But looking at the floor plates, all the interior floor plates on the residential are wood construction, and all the exteriors are concrete construction. That kind of allowed us to work with the structure that we had to properly get to the stand. Now, this is just kind of the basic facade system that we decided to use. This used thin brick as well as built-in insulation, and this allowed for us to use recycled Chicago bricks, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And those can actually be recycled from previous buildings that were built in Chicago that were possibly knocked down. We can recycle those bricks and use them in our facades. So here's kind of all of the exterior materials we have. We have the Chicago counter brick used in our thin brick assembly, as well as the metal panel assembly that can also be used using the same track system actually as the thin brick. So you kind of get this continuous insulated facade underneath, but you can use different materials on the outside. And then using a tubulite storefront, using double glazing, which allowed us to get even more insulating properties for all of the windows that we have. And then looking at the interior materials, kind of looking at the most cost-effective as well as environmentally friendly. So you have bamboo, cork, which are 2 very fast-growing materials. Cork, you don't have to harvest the tree. The cork actually used is just the bark. So this allows for continuous usage of the same tree. Bamboo is very fast growing as well as durable, so it's good for those interior residential floors. Just kind of, as I mentioned before, using the low heat glass, and then type 2 vinyl wall coverings are used from recycled materials, and they're eco-friendly along with providing that kind of modern aesthetic. And then the structural materials, so just kind of looking at recycled steel for those kind of lower level steel and concrete, the lifetime green coating, epoxy replacement, and that's for any of the exposed concrete floors in, say, residential lobby on the first floor or in the commercial corridor. And then here's just kind of some of the counts for each of the materials, the main materials that are used in these buildings. So kind of giving totals for the amount of facade panels, as well as the interior finishes and the cubic yards for all of the concrete used in the structure.
All right, yeah, here's our posters. We did not get them printed, sadly. Yes, they were. You got it up in. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and then just kind of reiterating the top 10 analysis of and for energy, looking at the PV panel farms, solar windows, and just that form finding that sustainable stuffing. Designed for economy, all the rental storefront commercial units, linked to the double height mezzanine, linked to the courtyard, linked to the parking garage. Designed for well-being, just all the greening, all the streetscaping pause areas, amenity spaces for residents, both low income and market rate. Designing for water, thinking about, as we talked about, all the ways that water comes onto site, all the ways it can be used and reused and then reiterated on the site. Designing for equitable community, having a 50% low income, 50% market rate accessibility to those residential units. All the same layouts, styles, and formats. All the access services and amenities, again, designing for change. Provide many leasing spaces geared towards small businesses that can be easily changed and adapted to fit the needs of each business. Designed for discovery. After school programs geared towards teaching young adults about sustainable living and ecological practices. So yeah, just engaging the community, engaging every age level, engaging children, students, and financially autonomous adults, elderly people, just making sure everybody is thought about in the community and everybody has a place in it, and especially the building. Designing for integration. Looking at resources. And thank you very much for sitting in, everybody.